This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guests only. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. And because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Welcome to Once Shattered, Picking Up the Pieces, a podcast devoted to changing the way eating disorders and mental illness are viewed in our society. With your hosts, Jack and Linda Major and Ellen Bennett. Today's guest is Don Blackwell. Don Blackwell is a trial attorney in Miami, Florida. He is, and for the past 20 years, has been an outspoken advocate on mental health issues within and outside the legal profession, which has made him a sought-after speaker and a regular contributor on webinars and podcasts tackling this increasingly critical subject matter. Don has written and spoken extensively on the need for a heightened degree of civility among lawyers, which he has dubbed compassionate professionalism, and more generally, on the need for greater understanding, vulnerability, and empathy in our day-to-day interactions with one another. Don also is the author of Dear Ashley, A Father's Reflections and Letters to His Daughter on Life, Love, and Hope, 2013, and more recently, of Retune Your Heart, Finding the Extra in the Ordinariness of Everyday Life, and its companion journal, The Playbook of Your Childhood Heart, 2025.
Welcome, listeners. We're so glad you're here with us today, and we're very excited to introduce you to our very special guest, attorney, author, advocate, father, and husband, Don Blackwell. But first, I'd like to welcome my husband and soulmate, Jack Major, and Ellen Bennett may be joining us a little bit later, but she's not here just yet. So, Jack, welcome.
As always, great to be here with you, Linda, and great to have this connection with Don Blackwell. I think Don and I connected on LinkedIn a few years ago, and I've been following him and read his book in 2 days. I just went through and couldn't put it down, but I did go to sleep and got up the next morning and finished it. So it's a wonderful book. It really,
quite a tribute to the author.
Yeah. As Linda knows, I'm not a big reader, but we do a lot of audiobooks now. But it was a great book.
So I'm going to just read the quote that I came up with today for our episode, and I think it's very fitting. It's by Zig Ziglar, a very famous motivational speaker, I think, who has passed on. But here is this quote that lives on. Your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude. And without further ado, welcome Don Blackwell.
Thank you, Linda and Jack, for all of those really very kind words. I have to tell you, it's really a privilege, and it's very humbling for me to be able to share this time with both of you. And I just really want to take a moment to honor and affirm the work that both of you have done through the years. It's really extraordinary.
Wow. Well, right back at you.
Yeah.
Right back at you. So, Don, your books are so well written, honest, and so impactful on many levels. They are also hopeful and centering. This is so important, especially now because of the times we are living in. In Retune Your Heart, you share parts of your childhood that were challenging, to say the least. Can you share a little about your childhood and how it affected the way you perceive the world, and also where people can find your books?
Well, people can find the books at the usual places, Amazon. Also, they can go to the website that I created around the book, which is retuneyourheart.com, and all of the other usual online places. My childhood was difficult, I guess, challenging in many respects. My mom was kind of an unrepentant, unapologetic alcoholic. My dad was, a child of the Depression era, which I think, not unlike many who grew up in that time period, was very committed to his work, sort of distant emotionally. And So I grew up in a place where I came to believe that love and affection were things that had to be earned, and you earned those things by doing, and really not just doing, but doing perfectly. So how did that translate into my growing up? I became a doer. I could do with the best of them. I convinced myself that the more you did, the more likely it was that you were conveying love, and the more likely it was that you would receive love. And of course, that's a very distorted view of the world, right? And it leads to a lot of issues, I think. I mean, I often share with people the fact that I would have traded every gift that I ever received as a child for the gift of knowing that I didn't have to be perfect. Unfortunately, that mentality, that doing mentality, translated into my insistence that the people around me also do, that they also do exceptionally well. And, that created sort of a very unhealthy environment, really, not only in my work life, but in my personal and family life as well.
This whole world now, you watch television shows and commercials and everything, and everybody on there seems to be this perfect person, and
the perfect prototype and how they
prototype.
look.
Okay, right, how they look. So, and I was interested in watching the Olympic hockey, and when how the Americans were so happy, and the Canadians winning the silver medal, it was like they didn't even want to put them on, because they didn't win the whole thing. And then I heard, I didn't see the baseball game the other night because I don't stay up that late anymore, but I know that the American team took off the medals after the ceremony and stuff because they didn't win the gold medal and stuff. And I said, well, what kind of a lesson does that serve our youth that are playing sports or whatever, that if you don't win the whole thing, it's just not worth it. And it puts so much pressure, and a lot of that's from their peers, a lot of it's from their parents, a lot of it's from their coaches, that
But just the honor of being there, all the hard work. I mean, it's recognized by the whole world, and yet they don't feel good enough about it. So I mean, it's got to be disappointing if you don't take it all home. But that's the cherry on the top. But the whole cake is wonderful.
But that's what society is. That's what society is like now. It's like perfect. Gotta be number one, or else it's not worth it. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the messaging is very challenging for young people, Jack, as you point out, and it's increasingly more pronounced, right, with social media, and you see the extent to which people are willing to go to portray this image that's really not reflective of what the day-to-day aspects of life are all about.
Right. So we just thank you for sharing your personal journey. I know it's hard to share a personal journey like this, but you've done it honestly and so eloquently. You're an accomplished trial attorney and have a busy life raising a family. So was writing books something you always knew or wanted to do?
I started writing as a very young man. I guess to some extent it was one of the ways in which I sort of escaped from the environment that I was living in. And I started writing poetry, actually, as a very young person. And you all will be able to relate to this. I also sort of developed this practice of rewriting songs, and I rewrote virtually all of David Gates and Brett's songbook. A funny kind of aside, a friend of mine in the neighborhood knew that I wrote poetry, and I guess wanted to impress his girlfriend. So he asked me if I would rewrite some of Brett's songs so that he could give them to his girlfriend. So I was sort of ghostwriting for him for a number of months, until somehow this young woman discovered that actually he wasn't the one writing these songs that she was becoming so enamored with, and she insisted that she meet me. So that was kind of a interesting sort of side story of my writing. And then I really put writing aside when I went off to college and through law school. And it was really as a result of Ashley's battles with my daughter Ashley's battles with anorexia that I felt sort of compelled to start writing again. And once I did, there was this really kind of outpouring of writing that had sort of, I felt like had been bottled up all of those years. And I actually, for a period of time, really over 2 or 3 years, really wrote almost every day.
Wow.
Well, it's really interesting, the writing aspect, and, writing from your heart. But also, attorneys are very eloquent. So it's very interesting how you became a trial attorney, because I watch, I've seen attorneys when I've been on jury duty, and I watch television and movies, and always so eloquent. So I'm in awe of the way that you, I'm sure as an attorney, do the same thing, and how you've put it out there for everybody to see in your books. It's beautiful.
Do your fellow attorneys read your books? Do you know?
Interestingly, no, I think is the short answer to that question. Attorneys tend to be a kind of different breed of people, and people are, I think, sometimes sort of fascinated by the extent to which I share so vulnerably, not only in my writing, but when I have the opportunity to speak at legal conferences and things of that sort. I think I'm sort of a curiosity in that regard, right? And especially to see a male trial attorney who's willing to, stand up on a stage in front of a couple of hundred lawyers and be vulnerable and be emotional, which I often am when I talk on some of these subjects. To the men, I'm probably a little scary. To the female lawyers, they're like kind of fascinated by that. So, and very welcoming of the messaging, really.
Well, it's a messaging that everyone needs to hear.
Well, and I think it's so important for men, and to show men that they can show their emotions. I almost always tear up when we're at an event where we're talking, and we were at a college last week, and it was the same thing. I was kind of telling the story, and just, I tear up at some point, and it's okay. It's okay.
And he used to write me. He used to write me poetry when I was dating too. So, we were dating, so he's always had a sensitive side, which I absolutely love. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Don.
No, not at all. Jack, I think that I really appreciate the fact that, I tell people there's always this river running just below the surface, right? When you've been in the trenches, especially when it comes to battling eating disorders, and the emotional energy that requires of the people whose loved ones are struggling, you really, it's a high emotion environment, and when you live in it for a sustained period of time, especially, revisiting that is just always very challenging.
Yeah. So I can only imagine. But I'm going to read Ellen's question now for you, since she isn't here. I can't be here right now. So these are Ellen's words. As an educator, I have seen firsthand the impact of family dysfunction and fragmentation, which you describe in your book. For those who have not experienced that kind of disconnection, it can be difficult to fully grasp how chaotic, isolating, and overwhelming these situations can be. How can we help others develop greater compassion and understanding for realities like this, experiences that are so often hidden behind silence?
Yeah, I really feel like that's an excellent question, and I think the starting point really is the sharing of the experiences and the sharing of the stories, because I think Ellen's right. I think that too often there's this sense that those kinds of experiences have to remain hidden. They have to be in the shadows somewhere, and they're ours to bear, and I think a willingness to be vulnerable and to share those experiences, and to not only share sort of the dark pieces of them, but also to demonstrate how you can move from that darkness to light is critical, because what I've found, at least in my own experience, is that the more you're willing to share those things and the deeper you're willing to go, the more likely it is that you're giving other hearts that are similarly situated, that are bearing those same sort of silent struggles, permission to also begin sharing and kind of begin the hard work that is required to transform those experiences into something positive.
Yeah, that's
and that's why I like to share with people where I started from. I tell people, if they knew me 10 or 15 years ago, they really wouldn't recognize that person as the person that's sitting in front of them. And I do that for a reason, right? I mean, none of us started in this place. At some point along the way, all of us experienced something traumatic, something that broke us, some form of brokenness. And I think it's important for people to recognize that I didn't start here. I redefined what a AAA personality was for, the better part of the first 40 years of my adult life. And it was really only as a result of Ashley's immeasurable suffering that I began to take a very inventory, right? A very introspective look at where I was and my own need for change. So, yeah, I think the most important piece is talking about it, because it gives permission for others to know that they're not alone,
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. I mean, it's just, and I know, through this journey we've been on with Emily, and where we are now, we've talked to so many people, and there's so many more people out there that are dealing with the same things that we dealt with, and I'm still dealing with it. And I just...
Yet at that time, we felt so alone, because nobody was talking about it then. Nobody was, things have opened up a lot, since then. We still have a long way to go, but at least the conversations are happening, and people aren't as afraid to admit that they're struggling with a mental health condition or an eating disorder or depression.
Yeah, but I know, how hard it is to tell that story and tell it over and over again. But I just encourage so many more people to tell their story, in some way. They don't have to write a book, but just tell their story and don't hide it in the house, and just get the help, in a safe place. And that's what we've created, is a safe place for people just to talk and open up and not hold it inside, and not.
But also, not everybody deserves to hear the story. So it has to be, use your senses and find a community that will understand, right?
Again, all mental illness is important, and everybody's talking about the mental illness crisis around the world, and how so many people don't get the help that they need and everything. But and we focus on eating disorders, and eating disorders are, as Cindy Bulick says, the redheaded stepchild. Nobody wants to talk about it, and nobody realizes the extent of eating disorders around the world.
But they never stand alone. There's always anxiety.
Correct. That's correct. So, we're always talking about depression and anxiety and bipolar and all that. But these people with eating disorders have those co-occurring things too. And, and I always say, everybody's talking about suicide. Well, treating an eating disorder is treating suicide, because, how many people with eating disorders commit suicide? So I at 73, I just need to, I get so frustrated. I want things to change and change quickly. And yeah.
So that's a great segue into this next question. So you wrote the book, The Playbook of Your Childhood Heart. Can you tell us why its message is so important and why you had to write it?
Yeah, this is really kind of an incredible story. Really the whole foundation of what I have been doing over the last few years. So I wrote Retune Your Heart, and a good friend of mine, called me one Friday afternoon and said, "Hey, Don, the book, it's really great. Love everything about it." She said, "But how do you do this?" And I just kind of stopped in my tracks. And I thought, you know what? Why didn't I think of that? I mean, here I wrote this sort of story of my own journey, right? From what I hope comes across as my own journey from this sort of sense of brokenness to where I am today. But I never really shared with folks kind of what I view as being the pathway from point A to point B. So I took that brief telephone conversation on a walk with me, and really kind of remarkably, by Sunday afternoon, I had written The Playbook of Your Childhood Heart in the span of 2 days. And I say that I wrote it, but really there are these moments in my writing and really in my life where I recognize that I am really just serving as a vessel or a conduit through which a hand and a heart much bigger than mine are sort of putting the words on paper. So The Playbook of Your Childhood Heart is sort of a journal companion to Retune Your Heart. And it's really, I like to view it as a self-guided tour back to what I call your acoustic self, or back to the heart of your childhood, the heart that accompanied you into the world. And it's largely inspired by my now 3-year-old granddaughter, Macy. Really is the inspiration for a lot of my writing these days. And so it's a 13-week exercise. Each week has a name to it, and it sort of encourages moments of reflection on your childhood, moments on reflection on those same issues as an adult, and then encouragement for how to sort of move from one to the other.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I love your Monday morning musings, and with your pictures of Macy. And those, so I follow those on LinkedIn all the time. So you put in a great deal of time writing and blogging and being a mental health advocate. It's incredible the amount of time and work you put into this. And so what's your why? Why behind all these endeavors?
Yeah, Jack, I think it's a couple things that we've touched on, right? One of the things that you touched on a moment ago, I just feel this compulsion to share, right? How do we make sense of this profound period of darkness that all three of us, to differing degrees, have gone through in our life? How do you make sense out of that? How do you bring some light out of that sense of darkness? So that's really one of the driving forces behind it, right? I want to honor the courage that my daughter displayed in her battles, first with an eating disorder and later with substance use disorder, which, as both of you know, is very common in the eating disorder experience. I want to show men that there is a power in vulnerability, that you don't need to apologize for being a sensitive man in the world. And I guess one of the principal drivers in it is that I want my grandchildren, Macy, obviously, and I have a 10-year-old grandson named Jake. I want them to know me. And I want them to hear it from me. I want them to know everything about me, and I want them to know the impact that they have had and continue to have on my life. So, yeah, sort of the why of it.
It's beautiful.
Well, I can see the emotion in your why. Yeah, I mean, it's, as you know, people say to us, you know, how do you do this? You know, how do you keep doing this? And I say, well, I don't know how we can't keep doing this, because Emily deserved it. All those others that have lost the battle deserve it, and all those that are struggling now, that they deserve it. And as you know, statistics, I hate statistics, because that, as they say, behind every statistic is a person that's not here anymore, a person that's struggling or whatever. And when you see that the fact that, only 20% of people that are struggling with an eating disorder get the help they need, and so many people, that say, oh, I was lucky. People, we were just at a college last week, and one of the girls came up and, came to our table and talked to us. And as she was walking away, she goes, I almost died, but I got lucky. And, so, and there are tremendous resources in this country that aren't available in other countries. We talked to a woman in Canada the other day, and Canada's resources for eating disorders are almost,
a lot less than here.
A lot less, in the UK, it's a battle. So, but the resources here are, if you have the means, they're not affordable for everybody. So part of the reasons people don't get help is the shame and the stigma of not coming out and asking for it. And then the
cost is a huge barrier for so many.
Huge barrier, and it has to be addressed. I mean, there are great resources and great people out there doing great work, but we have to address the affordability of it for all.
What? Yeah, one of the I sort of grew a little disenchanted by the bigger system, and really sort of transitioned into working on a one-on-one with people who are actually suffering, right? I mean, because the reality is that there's also a lot of people who the system or their family systems have sort of given up on them, right? Mm-hmm. It's been going on so long, everyone's exhausted. So just being available, and I know you all can relate to this. I mean,
absolutely,
being willing to listen, being willing to offer a word of encouragement, just an acknowledgement of the pain and of the suffering and of the struggle, and just kind of constantly serving as sort of a beacon of hope makes a difference. Maybe it doesn't make a difference on a grand scale, but sort of my view of the world has shifted a little bit in that, all of us can make a difference in one heart, and that's a real difference.
Yeah.
So.
And sometimes it can save a life. You know what I mean? Just to keep somebody going.
Do you know what you mean?
And it seems like so little, but it's not. But so many times, and so many people who've struggled for a long time, the system does let them down, and people, medical professionals, have written off a lot of these people, and it's so sad. We just have to do better, and I think a lot of times that people don't understand. I think sometimes it's them protecting their own licensure. How do you say that word? Licensure.
Well, their own liability. I mean, they think
Right.
there's a liability out there. So they work with somebody, and now they're afraid, this isn't going to end in a recovery, or it might be ending in a suicide. So they drop them. So now these people are out there with nobody.
But I would say that there are so many wonderful, dedicated, caring professionals out there at the same time. So
Yeah, absolutely.
we just have to find a better balance and have people not be afraid. So I'm going to move on to another one of Ellen's questions. I like this because I'm a person who loves hugs. I'm half Italian, so you know how that goes. So Ellen's question is, let's talk about the power of hugs. Your reflections on growing up in a house where hugs were scarce or non-existent are a stark contrast to my own experience. I am a hugger. Sometimes a hug is all that needs to be said. What are your insights now, and what truly brings meaning to our daily lives? And I know you spoke to this a little bit before, but there might be a little something you want to add more.
Yeah, I'm very animated about what I like to call drive-by hugs, which I think we're all sort of, or many are accustomed to in the adult world, right? They're incredibly lame. And yet I say that, and I realize that probably for the first 50 years of my life, largely because I think of what was modeled in my childhood home, I just didn't get it where hugs were concerned. Like, what's the big deal? I mean, I got the what I call the vacuous hug that is kind of a physical event, but there's really nothing behind it. And that's sort of what I grew up with. And really, again, through Ashley's journey, I began to appreciate, the value of a hug. You didn't have to do anything to fix something. You could actually just hold and be held, and sort of the restorative power of a well-given hug is sort of hard to capture, right? So, and my daughter was the same way, no surprise, right? Didn't really want anything to do with hugging. This was sort of a reflection, I think, in part of her, insistence on independence and wanting to do it, convinced she could do it all herself. And really she was never a snuggler. My son was very much a snuggler, Ashley not so much. So we actually sort of made fun of ourselves about it when we started moving into this new world hug, if you will. So I would, for example, there was a period of time where I was taking her to work, and I would drive up in the driveway and she would come out the door, and we would run to each other and do this very dramatic kind of movie quality hug, and we would say, we suck at hugging so badly, and we just sort of made a game of just really practicing it for, some period of time. And now it's just, it's sort of an indispensable part of my heart inventory, right? I mean, I sort of measure individuals and relationships by the quality of the hug. So yeah, major transition for me. And I now have the top 5 huggers in my life, and I let them know where they fall on the hierarchy so they can work to improve if they feel like they really need to be number 1.
Wow. That's great.
And I, as you were talking about this, and I know going back to Retune your heart and your walking and meeting people on your walks and stuff, you know, you don't always have to go up and give somebody a big hug, but just a smile or just a conversation with them or something can make people, feel better. There's so many people now that are on their phones. They've got their headphones on while they're walking, and they just don't interact with people. And I don't want to stereotype the young people, but I just see it so much of their lack of communication skills and stuff. And so just
Well, and some people aren't comfortable with touch, and you have to respect that too. So I always, if I don't know somebody that well, I say, "Are you comfortable with a hug? Are you okay with a hug?" So, but
I just think it can make somebody's day if you just walk by somebody and just say, "Hey, how's good morning? How are you today?" And that can open up a conversation. I've had so many conversations with people just by saying hello, so, and,
It's interesting you say that. I actually have been working on this little project of a little book that I'm putting together for Macy that's entitled Word Hugs. And it's just a collection of writings that she's inspired that I want to give to her as a keepsake. And it was funny when I was talking to her about it on the phone the other day, I said, "Macy, do you think a word can give you a hug?" And she said, "Yes." And I just thought that was like such a beautiful moment. And I just smiled about it because I agree, Jack. There's all kinds of non-physical ways to sort of wrap people in a warm sense that they're valued, that they're important, and that they're being cared for, and it's not hard to do in today's world, right? I mean, there are so many vehicles available to us now that weren't available when the three of us were growing up, to let other people know that they're being noticed, that they're seen, that they're valued. It's just checking in. It takes a matter of seconds, but it makes all the difference in the world. I'll frequently in the course of the day, I'll just pick 3 or 4 people and I'll just drop them a simple note, or maybe it's a text or it's a message on one of the many social media platforms, and just say simply, "I just want you to know that you're on my heart today." Mm-hmm. I mean, simple gestures like that make a profound difference. And more often than not, I'll get a response that says, "I can't believe the timing of this. It came, in a moment when I really needed just a few words of encouragement or affirmation."
Yeah.
We can all make that contribution in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I forget.
We can't keep waiting for these big institutions to be the instruments of change, I guess is what I'm saying. Yes. I mean, we can sit around waiting for legislation in the eating disorder field for the rest of our lives. We can sit around waiting for the world to do what's right relative to investing the dollars necessary to support research in the eating disorder field. All of these things, but where you and I and many others can make a real difference is sort of in these grassroots efforts, just taking a moment to let someone know that they're noticed.
Yeah. No, I
can
go ahead.
No, I can speak to that from my childhood, right? I mean, we talked earlier about, what was the experience? Well, I mean, there are few experiences in the world that are more disheartening than not being noticed, right? Than feeling that you have to set yourself on fire for someone to take notice of the fact that you're struggling. Yeah. We just have to stop doing that. Yeah. If we pay closer attention, you can see folks who are hurting, who are struggling, and you can offer some words that let them know, "Hey, I'll walk alongside you. I'm here."
Your message is really powerful, and I hope that there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast, and especially a lot of males, because it's such a special quality to have that sensitivity and compassion. And when a loved one, or especially a child, is struggling, you love them more than life itself. They're everything. And it's a very, very hard thing to deal with because of the powerlessness we feel. But those little things are things that everybody can do. And I imagine with what your daughter went through and what you went through as a child when her eating disorder surfaced, it had to be doubly hard on you on so many different levels. But
So on that note, because it's a good transition, I want to flip question 7 and 8. So,
go ahead.
yeah. So what Linda just said, from a father's perspective, can you share some of your journey with your daughter and her eating disorder? Because
Jack.
as I go through this and we have groups and I say, where are the dads? We have so many mothers out there and in our meetings and in virtual meetings and stuff. Where are the dads? So.
Yeah, Jack, I was privileged to be invited to speak at NIDA's annual conference in 2013 on the heels of the publication of Dear Ashley, because, I was the bearded woman at the circus, right? As you just point out, what a dad has written something. What's this all about? So they said, hey, Don, would you come to the conference and talk to dads? I said, I'd love to do that. So I put together this, what I thought was this really inspirational message for dads, walked into the room, found out that there were 613 registrants for the NIDA conference in 2013, and one was a man.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It was Mike Barrett, who you all may know, the founder of Center for Change. Mike and I are since become good friends. But the room is filled with mothers and daughters, and I'm delivering a message for dads, navigating your daughter's eating disorder. And I drove away from that conference, and I was in disbelief, Jack. I mean, complete disbelief. I said, how is this even possible? And of course, by then, again, a disclaimer, I didn't start here, right? I started like every other dad, you guys go over there and fix it. Bring her back to me when she's better. That was the starting point, right? Until I became educated and I realized sort of the critical role that dads really should be playing in their daughters' treatment and recovery journeys. And so I drove away from that conference and I said, we got to change this. So before I literally had driven home, the conference was in Tampa. I was living in Miami at the time. I had formulated this idea that I ultimately called the Dad Initiative. And that was designed to really kind of try and promote this idea that dads need to be more involved in the process. And I really spent the next 5 years going around the country trying to spread this message of dads and daughters. That really became the focus of my work in the eating disorder community for the next several years. No, it needs to change. But I think, in fairness to dads, I think there's this sense that, when our daughters are very young, we're engaged, right? We're fully engaged. Daddy's a little girl, the whole thing. And then as they start to mature into adulthood, I think there's this sense that, maybe I'm not, I don't really understand this whole transition to womanhood thing that's going on. Let's let the mom sort of deal with that, and I'll stand on the sidelines and cheerlead. Mm-hmm. But what dads don't realize is like this profound role that they play in their daughters' lives and in their daughter's psyche. And I only came to that realization when I was sitting in a therapist's office, and the therapist had asked Ashley to write a letter to me about her struggles with her eating disorder, and she read it to me in that therapy room, and it broke me. Right? I mean, that was the moment that I realized I gotta go all in here, because I don't think dads fully appreciate the extent to which their daughters, in particular, want to avoid disappointing their dads.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. When our kids would always say when they'd come home and they'd bring grades home or whatever, and Linda would say, "Oh, guys, you guys did great," or whatever they did, it was a sporting event or whatever. You guys did great, and they'd say, "Oh, Mom, you think everything we do is great, but Dad, But I never put pressure on them. I don't know if it was their, again, the internal pressure to please me more or whatever. I never, said, "Oh, you guys got to do better. Oh, you got to be, because."
But you're more subdued, and I'm more emotional, and do things in a big way, and you do things in a smaller way.
Yeah.
But you never did put pressure on them. But you were quieter about it, I guess. Maybe that was it. I don't know.
Yeah, and Emily put pressure on herself. I always say, she'd come home and get a 95, and her best friend had a 96, and then she'd be upset because Kelly beat her. So,
it's okay.
Yeah.
I think there are always things we can look back at and wish we'd have done differently. But we're learning as we go. Sure. Our children are our best teachers, absolutely. And there's a saying, and this is a saying about mothers, but I think fathers need to be put in this one too, that a mother can only be as happy as her unhappiest child. And, we carry all those hurts with us, and we want so much to make things better. And, we all do what we can do, and sometimes things work out, and, sometimes they don't. Yep. But I always say to know that the love was always there is the most important thing. And
no question.
Yeah. Whew, okay. So I have a question here.
Number 7.
Yeah. Okay. We're
going back.
No, I know. Okay. Well, I'm gonna change up the order again, and I'm gonna say Ellen's question now, and then I'll use that one later because I think that'll be a nice way to finish up. So, Don, this is Ellen's voice again. Don, this is my understanding that you initiated the Legacy of Hope Summit, a consensus-based initiative and report on eating disorders in the U.S. The report was published in November of 2021, and it outlines a framework for addressing critical gaps in eating disorder care in the United States, focusing on 4 key areas: prevention, early detection, accessibility, affordability, and accountability, standards of care, research, and funding, highlighting that current funding is not commensurate with the severity of these illnesses. What inspired you to lead this important initiative?
Yeah, so sometime, I guess, in late 2019, I just really was seeing the dysfunction in the eating disorder community reach an all-time high. And I had stepped away from the national picture for several years, as I mentioned, to really start focusing on individuals. But I just felt compelled to dive back in a big way. So I took a chance, right? In the 10 years that I had spent in the industry, I had really made friends with a number of very highly respected people in the field. So I decided to send all of them a letter. It was a simple letter invitation. I was convinced that we could do better. I was convinced that prior efforts to find consensus should have worked. So I wrote them all a letter, and I said, look, I've got an idea. I want to gather all of the leading experts in the country in one place for a weekend. I want us to just sit down in rooms and figure this thing out. In those 5 areas that you mentioned, Linda, and I was really blown away. And who am I, right? I'm a dad of a young woman, like millions of other young women and young men suffered from an eating disorder, and more than 24 of them wrote back almost by return mail that they would be willing to participate in this exercise. They did so on their own dime. I didn't really fund any portion of it. They all flew to Dallas, where I was living at the time. We met in my law office for a weekend. I created outlines in each of these areas. 24 of the leading experts in the world, really. They went in 5 different conference rooms and they hammered out a blueprint for moving the industry, the community forward in all of those 5 areas. And I spent the next year writing the results of the summit into a report that ultimately was published in the International Journal of Eating Disorders. More than 150 folks from around the country, dietitians, practitioners, researchers, academicians, people with lived experience, all signed off on the report as well. And yeah, it was pretty remarkable.
Wow. And you were the catalyst for so much of that.
What a remarkable man you are. That's just to take that under your wing and it's so important. I mean, it's just, and as you know, that was 2019. Here we are, 2026, and so many of those things still need to be addressed. Almost all of them still need to be addressed. And again, I don't. There's so many great people out there in the big organizations, and as the more and more we're into this journey of the Emily Connection and the book and everything, these podcasts, we meet and come across so many more people that have such dedication and such a passion and a mission to make these changes, yet no changes are being made. And
there's a lot of reasons for that we don't have time to get into.
No, we don't have time.
But I would be happy to talk more about it with y'all.
Yes.
I'd love to.
I would like to stay in touch. This has been wonderful. Don, is there an excerpt from your book or one of your blogs that you'd like to share with our audience? I'm sure that it would be so well received.
Yeah, there's a couple of short ones, Linda, that I wanted to share. They're both out of the playbook, and I think they'd really be a great way to sort of wrap up our time together today. The first is taken from what I call Joy Week in the playbook, and it's entitled Don't Lose Sight of Joy. In the lyrics to her hauntingly beautiful and troublingly relatable theme to the Barbie movie, What Was I Made For? Barbie laments, I think I forgot how to be happy. Something I'm not. Something I can be. Something I wait for. Something I'm made for. I don't know about you, but I've allowed myself to lose sight of joy far too often in my life. It's easy to do amidst the noise, when you're preoccupied with adulting, when you are or believe you're uber important, when you take yourself way too seriously, get mired in the doing rather than the living and the loving. The thing is, the more times you lose sight of joy, the harder it gets to find it again. You forget where to look for it, what it feels like, how important it is. Some eventually stop looking, decide it's just not worth the effort, that they, quote, weren't meant to be happy, close quote, resign themselves to a life devoid of it. My dad did that. Don't be that person. If you're in a season where you've lost sight of joy, take up the search. Try to remember where you found it the last time it went missing. Start there. And if you're still struggling to find it, consider looking where I most often do, in the heart of a little child, because joy tends to go where it knows it's always welcome.
That's beautiful.
And then the last piece, and this is just critically important, it's entitled Boundless Love. I'll try and get through it.
Yeah.
I never do. Several years ago, I sat down for dinner with a therapist friend at a conference in the Midwest. We'd been corresponding for months via social media, but because we lived thousands of miles apart, had never met in person. Within minutes, my heart told me that its counterpart across the table was very special. And for the next 2 hours, my friend and I got out of their way and just let the two of them talk to one another. It was as if they'd known each other their entire lives. A few years later, I received a break of dawn text. My friend had suffered an unspeakably traumatic family tragedy, one that I felt completely ill-fitted to respond to. Late one night, in the midst of her overwhelming grief, I texted simply, "If it's any comfort, know this. I love you, and have since the day we met." There, I said it. Her response caught me a bit off guard. What kind of love are we talking about? Care to expand? In retrospect, her question shouldn't have surprised me. After all, I too had long since grown accustomed to fitting love into not so neat little worldly appropriate boxes, romantic, parental, familial, friend, etc., and to receiving and expressing it accordingly. The world insists we do that virtually from the moment we dip our little toe into the muddy waters of adulting. You'll find my reply to my friend's text in one of the most powerful pieces in my book. It's entitled simply, "What do you think?" For now, I offer this. Macy doesn't love that way. She spends every waking moment loving everyone whole and open-heartedly. And I might add, apologizes to no one for her indiscriminates. She also receives love with the same reckless, pedal-to-the-metal abandon. And here's the thing. Every heart that is lucky to be showered or even sprinkled with a droplet of that love is immeasurably brighter, lighter, and more joyful because of it. What kind of love am I talking about? The real kind, the boundless kind that accompanied all of us into this world, the soul-deep kind, the tethered at the heart kind, the kind that was never meant to and never will fit neatly into a box, the kind of love I wish for all of you. That and a safe, whimsical, playful, joy-filled journey back to where it all began, to the eyes and heart that accompanied you into this world, to your uniquely beautiful, authentic self.
Wow.
Wow. Well, you got through it, but I didn't.
Yeah, it's so
Oh my gosh.
beautifully said, beautifully written. What a great
God.
message.
I
Well,
wish,
you have
wish
so-
we had more time. We're coming to the end of our time here, but this has been unbelievably. Again, these things just fill our hearts. I mean, we just.
Because we feel validated and appreciated, and to know there's another wonderful person in our circle keeps us going for sure. You have such a eloquent way of getting your message across, and yet it's simple, yet it's eloquently stated in a way that not many people could do. But we are so grateful that you could join us today.
Yes.
Thank you, Don. Is there?
Yeah, really the pleasure is mine, guys. I just feel so privileged to be able to have spent this time with you all this morning.
God bless you. Thank you so much.
Well, we're going to stay connected.
You're a forever
for sure.
connection.
Yeah, you're an Emily connection.
Yeah, an Emily connection.
You're an Emily
Mother.
connection. Yeah.
And Emily and all our Emily connections are sacred. So I'm sorry Ellen couldn't be with us today, but we
me too.
we want to extend our sincere gratitude to you, Don, to our listeners, and we'd like to thank Rockbox Recording and Production and Scott Fitzgerald the remarkable sound engineer who helps us for every podcast, for his exceptional production of the podcast today, and so much more. Feeling very grateful and blessed today. And Don, what a great way to start our morning. Thank you so much.